Have you ever stopped to think about what would really happen if the sun simply went out right now? And when I say go out, I'm not talking about an ordinary night. I'm not talking about an eclipse or clouds blocking the light for a few hours. I'm talking about the sun literally going out like a light bulb burning out, like a candle losing its flame, leaving the universe completely dark around us. It sounds like something out of a science fiction movie. It seems impossible, and in a way, it is. But if for some incomprehensible reason this happened, what do you think would happen first? Do you imagine it would be instant cold, total darkness, worldwide panic? Reality is much more terrifying and fascinating than any movie has ever managed to show. Because the extinction of humanity would not be immediate, it would not be dramatic with explosions and screams, it would be slow, silent, methodically cruel. And each stage of this collapse would reveal how absolutely dependent we are on that giant ball of burning plasma that is 150 million kilometers away. Before continuing, let me ask you a question. Could you survive even for just a week without the sun? Comment below with your survival strategy, because by the end of this video you'll realize that probably none of us would have stood a chance. Let's start with the basics. The sun doesn't go out in an instant in our perception because the light it emits takes exactly 8 minutes and 20 seconds to reach Earth. So, if the sun went out right now, at this very moment, you would still have 8 more minutes of normal sunlight, 8 minutes of heat, 8 minutes of life as we know it, and nobody on Earth would know that the apocalypse has already begun. Imagine the scene. You're at the beach, at work, at school, watching this video, living your life normally, and the sun has already gone out, but you have no idea because the last light it emitted is still traveling through space towards you. During those final 8 minutes, everything would seem perfectly normal. People would be laughing, talking, complaining about traffic, planning dinner, posting Instagram stories, completely oblivious to the fact that the extinction clock has already started ticking. And then, after those 8 minutes, suddenly, without warning, without sirens, without anything, the sky would darken as if someone had flipped a cosmic switch. The sun would disappear from the sky instantly. There would be no gradual sunset, no beautiful orange hue on the horizon. It would be full light 1 second and absolute darkness the next. Panic would be immediate and global. People would look up in total shock. Scientists would despair, trying to understand what happened. Social media would collapse, with billions of people trying to figure out if it was real or some kind of temporary phenomenon. And governments around the world would go into total emergency mode. But here's the important detail in that first moment. The biggest problem wouldn't be the cold, because planet Earth retains heat for a considerable time thanks to our atmosphere and oceans, which act as gigantic thermal reservoirs. In the first hours after the sun went out, the surface temperature would begin to drop, but not instantaneously and not uniformly across the planet. Tropical regions, which are normally warm during the day, would experience a faster drop because the heat would dissipate more easily, while areas near the oceans would maintain relatively stable temperatures for longer due to water's ability to retain thermal energy. But make no mistake, the cold would be coming, inevitable and relentless. Scientists estimate that after the first week without sun, the average global temperature would drop to approximately 0 degrees Celsius, and that's just the beginning. Within a month, we would be facing temperatures around -50 degrees Celsius in most of the planet, and within a year, the Earth's surface temperature would reach a frightening -70 to -100 degrees Celsius. But hold on, because before that happens, other problems would have already decimated most life on Earth. Photosynthesis, the process by which plants convert sunlight into energy, would stop immediately. This means that all the plants on the planet would begin to die within days or weeks. And with the death of the plants, the entire food chain would collapse completely. Herbivores would have nothing to eat. Carnivores would lose their prey and the production of oxygen in the atmosphere, which depends mainly on photosynthesis carried out by terrestrial plants and phytoplankton in the oceans, would drop drastically. You might be thinking, but doesn't the atmosphere have enough oxygen to last a while? Yes, it does. Atmospheric oxygen wouldn't disappear instantly. But with the death of all plants and algae, the replenishment of this oxygen would cease completely, and although it would take thousands of years for the oxygen to be completely depleted, Other factors would have already eliminated us long before that happened. Now comes one of the most terrifying parts of this whole story. The collapse of human civilization wouldn't take even a week to begin. Think about it. Without sunlight, without electricity generated by solar energy, without the ability to grow food, with temperatures plummeting rapidly, chaos would take over in a matter of days. Supermarkets would be looted in hours. People would desperately try to stockpile food. Fuels would become more valuable than gold, because they would be the only way to generate heat and energy. And the social order, as we know it, would collapse completely. Governments would try to maintain control, declare a state of emergency, possibly martial law. But how do you control billions of panicked people when everyone knows the end is coming? Violence would explode on a global scale, not out of malice, but out of pure survival instinct. Because when you know there is no future, when you see your children cold and hungry, you would do anything to protect them. And here's a detail that few consider: the nuclear power plants scattered around the world. These power plants need constant cooling, and without electricity from the grid to keep the cooling systems running, emergency generators would kick in. But how long would the fuel in these generators last? Days? Weeks? When that fuel ran out, the plants would collapse, causing chain reactions of nuclear meltdowns around the planet, releasing massive radiation into the atmosphere and rendering large areas completely uninhabitable. Chernobyl and Fukushima multiplied hundreds of times simultaneously. But let's say some groups of humans managed to survive the first few months. Let's say some people had access to underground bunkers, power generators, stockpiles of canned food and water. How long could these people survive? The answer depends on how prepared they were and how much energy they could generate without the sun. Theoretically, communities with access to geothermal power plants, which harness the heat from the Earth's interior, or well-maintained nuclear power plants, could continue generating energy for decades, perhaps even centuries. These communities would have to live completely underground, growing food in artificially lit hydroponic farms, constantly recycling water and air, living a claustrophobic and artificial, but technically possible, existence. They would be like the last remnants of humanity, small bubbles of civilization on a dead and frozen planet. And here's a fascinating fact: the oceans wouldn't freeze completely immediately. The surface layer of the oceans would freeze in a matter of weeks, forming a thick layer of ice that would actually act as thermal insulation, keeping the water below relatively warmer for a much longer period. In the ocean depths, near hydrothermal vents that expel hot water heated by the planet's geothermal heat, life could continue for millions of years. Extremophile bacteria, giant tube worms, crabs, and fish adapted to living in total darkness would continue their lives completely oblivious to the apocalypse that devastated the surface. In a way, these deep-sea ecosystems would be the true survivors, the heirs of Earth, living in a world that never depended on the sun to begin with. As months turned into years, Earth would become unrecognizable. The atmosphere would begin to condense. Nitrogen and eventually oxygen would begin to liquefy and fall as rain in certain regions where temperatures were low enough, creating lakes of liquid oxygen and nitrogen on the frozen surface. The atmosphere itself would thin as the gases solidified, and eventually Earth would resemble Pluto, an icy, dead world shrouded in a thin layer of frozen atmosphere. Cities, monuments, everything humanity built would be buried under layers of ice and snow, preserved as time capsules of a civilization that once flourished under the warmth of a star. And perhaps billions of years from now, when our sun eventually becomes a red giant and engulfs the Earth anyway, or when some alien civilization explores our solar system, they will find this frozen planet, dig through the ice, discover the ruins of our cities, our skyscrapers perfectly preserved in the absolute cold, and wonder what kind of beings lived here, what stories this dead planet held. But here's the most fascinating and, at the same time, most terrifying part of all this. The sun can't simply go out. It doesn't work that way. The sun is a gigantic nuclear fusion reaction where hydrogen nuclei are fused into helium, releasing absurd amounts of energy in the process. And as long as there is hydrogen for fusion, the sun will continue to shine. Our sun has fuel for another 5 billion years. So, unless something completely outside the laws of physics happens, the scenario I just described is pure science fiction. It's impossible. But you know what isn't impossible? A massive solar storm that destroys all our electrical infrastructure, or a nuclear winter caused by war, or an asteroid impact that blocks sunlight for years, or climate change that makes large parts of the planet uninhabitable. These scenarios are not only possible, they are plausible, and in many respects would have similar effects to the sun going out, because ultimately what keeps us alive is not just sunlight, it's the delicate web of interconnected systems that this light sustains. From photosynthesis to the climate, from the oceans to the atmosphere. Remove any piece of this mechanism and everything collapses. So the next time you look at the sky and see that bright yellow ball up there, remember that you are looking at our Creator, our Sustainer, our only reason for existing on this planet. Without the sun, there would be no life, no oceans, no atmosphere, nothing but a frozen rock, drifting in the void of space. And if this video made you realize how fragile we are, how much our existence depends on factors completely outside our control, then mission accomplished. Now I want to know from you, if you had only 8 minutes notice before the sun went out, what would you do in those last moments of light? Would you spend time with your family, try to get to some specific place, or simply look at the sky and appreciate the last rays of sunlight that humanity will never see? Comment below, because I'm curious to know how each of you would react. And if you're not yet subscribed to the channel, now is the perfect time to hit that red button and activate the bell, because there's no shortage of content about the end of the world, scientific curiosities, and apocalyptic scenarios here, and I guarantee you won't want to miss the next one. Leave a like too, because it really helps the channel grow and bring this kind of knowledge to more people who, like you, are fascinated by the mysteries of the universe and the most extreme scenarios that science can imagine. And since you've made it this far and clearly enjoy this kind of thought-provoking content, click on that video that's appearing on your screen now and continue discovering more insane curiosities that will blow your mind, because the universe is gigantic, mysterious, and there's always something new to learn that will make you question everything you thought you knew about reality.